Have you ever spent your resources to upgrade a card just to realize it made no difference at all? Well, here are 10 cards you should never upgrade in Clash Royale. Kicking off our list as the 10th worst card to upgrade in Clash Royale, we have the Electro Spirit, which might come as quite a surprise to a lot of you because Electro Spirit really is not that bad of a card in Clash Royale. You can fit it in a good few cycle decks and things like that, but the thing about it, guys, is that sometimes underleveled E-Spirit is genuinely better than having it the same level or overleveled, because top players will sometimes purposely keep their E-Spirit level 14 at top ladder, where they have level 15 Princess Towers, so that way it gets two-shot by the tower, which people often think is a bad thing. They think that you have to level up your spirits quickly so that way they can connect to the Princess Towers, but with Electro Spirit, guys, it does activate your opponent's King Tower if your opponent goes for a troop in the correct placement, so sometimes it's actually better to have it underleveled so you can just freely cycle it instead of having to always play it and just worry about the liability of potentially activating your opponent's King Tower. And Electro Spirit is really not used that much for the damage, it's more so just for the area control, so it can still kill stuff like skeletons, bats, Skele King abilities, cloned units, stuff like that, even if it's underleveled. And yeah, man, E-Spirit is really not that versatile in the game either. I mean, it's very good in RG mainly, sometimes Xbow or something like that, but I feel like it's one of the most overrated spirits, if not the most overrated spirit in the game, because people often will throw it in stuff like Hog Rider, you know, Mine, or things like that, but Ice Spirit is almost always a better option in those decks that can just be so much better on defense and not give that opponent the free king activation. So I think E-Spirit being underleveled is no issue at all. It really does not do almost anything. Moving on to the 9th worst card to upgrade in Clash Royale, we have the Fisherman. Now, a couple months back, I probably wouldn't have even included Fisherman on this list because Fisherman was quite good, quite versatile in a lot of the meta decks, but Fisherman since then has gotten a nerf to where now its slow duration when it yanks in a unit is not quite as long as it used to be, so it's a little bit harder to defend with it, and it's not being used in as many decks as a result. But guys, the main reason why we have Fisherman here kind of lower on the list is because it's still a decent card to upgrade, but the thing about it is that it still performs its job really no matter what level it is, because, you know, a level 9 Fisherman will still pull a Hog Rider to your King Tower and get it activated just like a level 15 Fisherman would, and also if you pull in like a Giant or a Golem, it's pretty much the same no matter what level your Fisherman is, so level for a card like Fisherman really is not that important. You can actually get away with playing a Fisherman one level under, even at top ladder, because it still does the job it needs to do, and it still survives spells pretty good as well. Like, even if your Fisherman is kind of underleveled, you could still survive, like, a Fireball, and, you know, stuff like Lightning will still kill Fisherman, whether you're overleveled or underleveled, unless it's, like, super overleveled. And the thing about Fisherman, guys, is that it's really not a very versatile card right now. Before, it was kind of good in stuff like Pekka, you know, some bridge spam decks, things like that, but nowadays, people aren't really playing Pekka with Fisherman anymore, and more so, they're just using Fisherman in stuff like RG, and RG is a decent deck right now, I will give it that, but that's really all that Fisherman's being played in, so if you spend a lot of your legendary cards trying to max out the Fisherman, which by the way is very hard to do because I feel like legendary cards are actually pretty hard to level up compared to other rarities, well, then if you ever want to switch decks from RG to, you know, say Hog Rider or something random like that, you just can't make any use of the Fisherman, so yeah, that's really what I think about it. Making our way to the 8th worst card to upgrade in Clash Royale, we have the Elite Barbarians, which I'm sure a lot of you guys probably could have guessed would be on this list. By the way, guys, make sure to comment down below if you guys agree or disagree with each one of my rankings in today's video. So guys, with the Elite Barbarians, I'm sure a lot of people will say that overleveled E-Barbs are so overpowered, they just can't stop them no matter what, but the truth is that pretty much any card overleveled is going to be pretty strong. And if you think about it, so many other cards over E-Barbs would be a lot stronger overleveled, like an Archer Queen could one-shot Spirits. If you play a overleveled Goblin Barrel, the tower will just 3-shot it instead of 2-shot it. And if you have an overleveled Lava Hound, the Lava Pups will get 3-shot instead of 2-shot. So there's so many better cards to overlevel over E-Barbs, even so many common cards to overlevel instead of them. And they're really not that hard to counter. Even if they're overleveled, you can still just go for your Mega Knight, you could still go for a Skarmy, really anything like that. Any distraction units will take them out pretty easily. They just haven't been meta in so long, and I don't really ever think they will be very good in Clash Royale because Supercell kind of tries to, I feel like, stay away from these mid-ladder boiling pot cards that could just become really toxic for mid-ladder if they become too overpowered. Like, E-Barbs already are kind of toxic there because so many people have them overleveled since they're a common card. But yeah, Supercell doesn't really try to buff stuff like Wizard, Mega Knight, E-Barbs too much, and I don't think E-Barbs will ever really be that good. They were kind of good for some time in stuff like Three Musketeers or some bridge spam decks, but since then, Three Musketeers has completely died, and in bridge spam decks, they usually use Evo Barbs over E-Barbs. The 7th worst card to upgrade in Clash Royale has to be the Tornado. With Tornado, guys, you really just don't ever want to get much damage with it. I mean, sure, it does do tower damage, and it can kind of clean up little troops like Skarmies and things like that, but it's not really used for damage, so the level doesn't matter too much. The main thing about Tornado is that you want to use it to just pull stuff to your King Tower, or just pull stuff into your push or away from your push, and the strength of the Tornado itself, like the pull effect, is the same regardless of the levels, so in that sense, Tornado's level doesn't really matter much. The thing about Tornado also is that if you have underleveled Tornado, you can actually activate your King Tower easier against some stuff like, for example, a Graveyard. Some people actually purposely keep a level 14 Tornado on top ladder, so that way they can have a small chance to get their King up off of a Graveyard. And even an underleveled Tornado can still kill stuff like Spear Goblins, and the one issue with it, I guess, is that it does take one longer take to kill stuff like skeletons and bats, so it's a little bit hard to predict skeleton armies with it and things like that, but if you're still relatively quick with your predictions, it shouldn't matter too much, and Tornado underleveled will still provide quite a bit of value. As the 6th worst card to upgrade in Clash Royale, we have the Inferno Tower. I think Inferno Tower is pretty self-explanatory. The reason why we have Inferno Tower on this list, guys, is that no matter what level your Inferno Tower is, it can pretty much always do the job that it's meant to do. The job of an Inferno card is usually to just take down super big tanks like Golems, Giants, and Lava Hounds, and pretty much no matter what level your Inferno Tower is, even if it's like a level 6 Inferno Tower, it probably will still kill a level 15 Giant, just because of the way that Inferno Beams work in Clash Royale. They just ramp up so quickly, and normally when you have a level 15 Inferno Tower, it doesn't even have the chance to fully ramp up against a level 15 Giant or a Golem, but when you have it under level, it can still fully ramp up to even higher heights than the percent ramp up that it would at max level, so it still gets really good damage out there, even while being a little bit lower level, so a little bit weaker, but yeah, I feel like it still deals with stuff like that really well, and I think some people's counter argument will be the fact that underleveled Inferno Tower will have less HP, and that is true, but Inferno Tower already has so much HP to the point where even if it's a little bit underleveled, like 1 or 2 levels under, it could still survive stuff like Fireball extremely easily, Poison extremely easily. I think the only disadvantage would be if you're facing a Lightning deck, it might not be quite as good, but even then it could probably still happen to hold its own at a decent level, I would say. So yeah, Inferno Tower, just a card that works pretty much no matter what level it is, and that makes it really just not worth upgrading, or at least not worth prioritizing to upgrade. The 5th worst card to upgrade in Clash Royale has to be the Freeze Spell. The Freeze Spell is really not a card you ever use for damage, so there's really no point to upgrade it when all that you get from upgrading is more damage, because back in the day a few years ago, Freeze used to gain a longer freeze duration as you would upgrade it, but they changed that a while ago to where now it just gets damage increased when you upgrade it. So yeah, Freeze is used for that freeze effect, not really for the damage. You can still use it to kill stuff like skeletons and bats, that kind of thing, and sometimes there's a couple good interactions that you can get by, like, you know, freezing a troop and then zapping as well to kill it. But even if you have your freeze a bit underleveled, it will still kill skeletons, still kill bats, and probably still get most of those interactions going correctly for you. So freeze really just does not get almost any benefit from leveling it up, and the other thing about it is that it's not a very versatile card. All you can really play it in right now is Lumberloon Freeze and sometimes some Graveyard Freeze decks, but both of those decks are kind of out of the meta right now, so Freeze does work, and it's a fun card to play, but you don't really have to be high level to use it. Coming in as the 4th worst card to upgrade in Clash Royale, we have the Barbarian Hut. I know this might be kind of mind-blowing to some of the Barb Hut lovers, but guys, Barb Hut is absolutely garbage. It is just probably the worst card in Clash Royale history. I think it's only been good like 2 times ever. Even stuff like E-Barbs have been better quite a bit more than Barb Hut has ever been good. And Supercell really just doesn't like the playstyle of these defensive cards, these defensive spawners, so they're kind of just purposely making it a little bit weak, even though they know it's trash right now. They're probably still not going to buff it just because they don't really want spawners to be a mainstream way to play Clash Royale. They just want it to be kind of like a little thing on the side that's not too strong, I guess, that you can just have fun with sometimes. But yeah, even leveling up Barb Hut, guys, it really doesn't help too much. Like, Barb Hut gets fully countered by a Fireball, for goodness sake, so I don't know why you would play the card, honestly. It's genuinely so bad. You get a -2 trade from a Fireball, when Barb Hut should have a lot of HP and be kind of spell resistant compared to the other buildings. And Barb Hut really is not good in almost any deck in the game either, except maybe E-Golem is sometimes good with it, but even these days, Barb Hut has fell out of E-Golem decks too, so unless Barb Hut gets a huge buff, I don't think it's going to be good to upgrade, and even if it does get a big buff, it's still not the most important card to upgrade because leveling it up doesn't really change that much. Like, people are still going to counter with stuff like Bowlers, Wizards, and even if your Barbs are 1 level under, it's still not really going to make much of a difference, and they'll still get the DPS down to kill stuff like Hog Riders, for example. Alright guys, we're now inside of the top 3 worst cards to upgrade in Clash Royale, and making its way at number 3, we have the Skeletons. The Skeletons have to be one of the better and more consistent cards in all of Clash Royale history, but the thing about Skeletons is that the level of them really doesn't matter whatsoever. Like, you play them against a Prince, you play them against a Pekka, and you just want them to distract most of the time, not actually to do much damage. And even if you do want them to do damage, sometimes like against a Hog Rider or an RG, they still will do damage even when underleveled. Doesn't really change too much. They don't do that much damage anyways, so the amount of damage that you get lowered when you have them underleveled really is not much at all. The only interaction that really is bad with underleveled skeletons has to be when you play them against a graveyard. They take 2 shots to kill a skeleton that's higher level than it, but that's pretty much it. Besides that, skeletons are just gonna help you cycle all the same when they're underleveled and still distract all the same. The only issue is that you get just a tad bit less damage, which doesn't affect almost any deck in Clash Royale. The second worst card to upgrade in Clash Royale is undoubtedly the Clone Spell. Clone Spell is just so useless to upgrade. All you get from upgrading it is that your cloned troops are a little bit higher leveled compared to if you have it underleveled. But that's really the last thing you would care about, because with Clone, all the cloned troops are just with 1 HP. They spawn with 1 HP. And even if their damage is a tiny bit less, that really doesn't matter at all most of the time, because when you have, like, you know, say a Lava Hound, Baby Dragon, Bats, you clone that all up, or you have like a Skelly Barrel, Giant Skeleton Push, you clone that all up. The levels really don't matter at all. Like, what you just want to do is swarm your opponent and kind of bait out their spells and things like that. So even if your clone is a little bit underleveled, that's really not going to change almost anything, because, you know, you just want to swarm them, and you're going to swarm them regardless of the level of those clone troops. And not to mention the fact that Clone Spell has to be one of the worst spells of all time. Maybe even the worst spell of all time. I'm not really sure what's worse. You could say, like, maybe Mirror is worse, but Mirror is probably a little bit better overall, a little bit more consistent. At least, like, some bait decks can kind of run it. Yeah, I mean, Clone Spell, I don't think they're ever going to really make it too broken, because if they do make it broken again, it's going to just be so toxic, and it will make a really bad environment for the game. So, Clone Spell, do not waste your resources on it. And now, the moment you guys have all been waiting for, the very worst card to possibly spend your resources upgrading in Clash Royale has to be the Skeleton Army. The Skeleton Army is just so not level dependent. Like, you could have a level 6 Skeleton Army versus a level 15 Skeleton Army against a Pekka Prince push, and they'll do exactly the same thing. They'll still counter both exactly the same. And more often than not, Skeleton Army is just basically instantly taken off the board with like a Zap or a Log, something like that. So it doesn't even matter that much anyways what level it is. It's more so just to bait out your opponent's spells, or if they don't have the proper spell for it, even if it's underleveled, it will still just destroy their entire push and completely wreck them and just ruin their game. Not to mention the fact that also Skarmy is really just not that good right now in Clash Royale. There's so many better options, like, you know, Guards and Goblin Gang, stuff like that, which are just a little bit safer. They still get good value if your opponent doesn't spell them down, but they just have a lot more of a safety net feature, whereas Skeleton Army just gets zapped and instantly taken off the board. So that's gonna do it, guys, for my top 10 worst cards to upgrade in Clash Royale tier list. Let me know if you guys enjoyed the video, and make sure to subscribe if you did. Alright guys, take care and have a good day. Bye!